Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Kanaj. I'm the editor of NJBIZ. Welcome to our discussion on the business of cannabis. A hot topic for sure, and as debates in Trenton recently show, one that remains somewhat controversial. Now, as a matter of fact, in our latest print edition, which many of you may have, we have a fairly comprehensive look at the state of play, not only in Trenton, but all around New Jersey. So I would urge you to check that out. If you do, I think you'll find a couple of things that are clear. Number one, the medical program is not only here to stay, but it's also only likely to get larger. There seems to be a bipartisan consensus that's formed around that idea. Recreational adult use is a different story, as we'll hear, although there again, the top three elected officials in this state, all of whom belong to the governing party, say they favor legalization, as do a majority of the voters, according to the polls. So that's coming at some point, maybe. But what we're going to focus on this morning is what you need to know right now. And there's nobody better to do that than Scott Rudder. Scott is the president of the board of directors of the New Jersey Cannabusiness Association. The organization works to develop and expand the state's cannabis business in a sustainable and responsible way. He's also a partner at Burton Trent Public Affairs. He served 3 terms in the state assembly and was a member of the town council for 10 years. Scott, it's all yours.
All right, good morning, everybody. What an interesting time we're living in, huh? We had this all locked in, ready to go, June 30th of 2018. And here we sit approaching June 30th, 2019. And the world has changed a little bit. You know, there's been a lot of consistency on the medical side, but there's been a lot of inconsistency when it comes to the adult use side. So we got these great panelists up here, going to pose some good questions. But I really want to get everybody centered around the state of the state, where we are in the world of cannabis, and it's going to be really pretty much an open-ended question. I'm going to start with Bill here. He's been very much involved in this battle for 5-6 years now. Very involved in what's going on the adult use side, decriminalization discussions, medical marijuana, RFAs, so forth. So, Bill, what's going on? Now, Bill, what do you see happening in the next, say, 45 days? So we hear potentials of RFAs popping as soon as this week. We hear the medical bill moving forward with a lot of support. What are the conflicts that are happening, and is there still a chance for adult use?
Sure. We're off the record here, right? There's no reporters anywhere. You know, I've been doing this for 20 years in terms of policy as a former government staffer. We were just talking up there about the weird 3-dimensional chess game that is New Jersey politics. And for those of you that are less familiar with New Jersey politics and more familiar with the politics of cannabis, and there are those as well, this is where the insanity kind of merges. You have a lot of different overlaying factors here, a lot of troubled waters. You know, we were really close to getting this done. And I say we, there's been a broad coalition on this experiment on legalization. And it started a while ago. It started when Chris Christie was still in office. I joked up on the stairs up there that most of us thought somebody named Steve was going to be the governor, Steve North or Steve South. This guy, Phil, nobody really knew at the time. He has been a full-throated supporter, although not originally on board with legalization, but I think the governor leaned in as both a candidate and new governor. And the Senate president and the speaker have both been full-throated supporters of this, as well as have been some of your former colleagues, Scott, in the legislature. There's good issues going on in the merits that I think are confusing this topic. I'll give you an example. There is a legislator who represents a urban area and a lot of minority constituents that raise with me this concern. If someone is pulled over right now, what happens, right? If you're pulled over, what happens? And I said, well, you know, there'd be a trained drug recognition officer that would evaluate whether you were under the influence of something, you were impaired. And then there would be an arrest made. You'd be taken to a police station. You'd be asked to draw blood. You could refuse. There's other issues go there. But if you had cannabis in your system, that was really the question, you could be charged with a DUI. She said, that's why I'm against it. I said, this makes no sense, right? We just explained there's a process. Her concern was one of the things we're fighting on racial social justice issues, that in a predominantly white community, a minority driving through would be subjected to a subjective test first. And then we've told everyone in the state that it is now legal to get high on the weekends. It is legal to buy this cannabis and use it as long as you're not driving. But the test is a subjective one, and there is racism, and there are problems with our criminal justice system, and that was a concern. And so you need time. You need time to have conversations with folks and explain those things. I think there's been a lot of work on the racial social justice side, but it's hit that confusion. It's also hit the confusion of the budget, and it's also hit the confusion of this crazy tax credit fight we're having in Trenton right now. So that is where the gridlock has occurred, and I think prevented us from getting this done in March.
So Dan, you have clients, right? I think most of the interest in New Jersey was on the medical side for sure, right? But when you're looking at investment, we're looking at the adult use side, and looking at the medical side as an opportunity to segue into adult use eventually, and that's how they want to get their start. How would you advise your clients? Like, how are you adjusting to this as an attorney representing clients?
Yep, sure. The short answer is start now. Start thinking now. Start putting your teams together. Start looking for real estate. Everyone was very, very excited about adult use, and we came kind of that close, and we'll see where it goes from here. The reality is now on the medical side, whereas before, and I know we'll get into this, there was a requirement to be totally vertically integrated under the statute, the current statute. In other words, you had to do everything from grow to sell. What they're working on now is language that would allow you to do one or more of the different steps in the supply chain. So you could be just a grower, just a processor, possibly just a wholesaler. It sounds like there's going to be a wholesaler license, just a dispensary. So you can sort of divorce yourself from the idea that you have to be an expert in everything. You can focus on one thing. This is designed to open up the market, open up the opportunities for everybody who can't do everything. They don't have $20 million to throw at a vertically integrated operation, but they do have capabilities and resources that they can use to do one of these aspects. So what we're doing with clients now is saying, look, we know you were excited about adult use legalization and possibly getting a license on that side and becoming an operator and participating in this industry. That's going to have to get tabled for a while, but look at what they're doing on the medical side. It's virtually the same thing. There are differences. There are more hoops to jump through. But the point is, you are going to be able to apply when all the dust settles for basically the same types of licenses on the medical side that you might have applied for on the adult use side. So we are, again, kind of counseling our clients the same way we were from the beginning. You need to start early. It takes longer than you think it will take to get things lined up. You need to establish your team. You need expertise, especially if you're going to go for a cultivation license. I mean, they are going to ask you, what experience and success have you had in the legal cannabis cultivation field? And if you say zero, that's going to shape up badly against a competitor applicant who has that experience. So you need to find your team, put your teams together, start looking at real estate options, like I said, because there will inevitably be hurdles to overcome as far as what certain municipalities are going to say with respect to medical and adult use and whether or not they're going to allow it in their boundaries. And you need to start your organizational effort because, as Scott's saying, RFAs could come out tomorrow, could come out this week, requests for applications. They could be RFAs for grow licenses. They could be RFAs for more than that. We really don't know right now, and I think we'll talk about that more. But the message to everyone that we're talking to is it is not too early, and it isn't necessarily too late, but it is surely not too early to start getting into this in a big way, because when the RFAs do drop, you're not going to have very long to turn them around. You're not going to have very long to get your application done and in. I mean, 30 days? 45 days. I mean, last year when they were asking for vertically integrated license applications, you had 30 days in the end, practically 45 days, but really 30 days. So it's going to be a very fast turnaround. So short answer to a long question or something like that.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
So S10, so we're talking about the legislation. There's S10, there's A10, both medical marijuana bills, medical cannabis bills, expansion. There's a lot of good things in there. Really good things for patients, really good things for business operators. George, one of the things that's in there, you know, George represents Curaleaf and current operator in New Jersey. There's something in there, Cannabis Lounge. You know, so there's a Cannabis Lounge that's in there. Cannabis Lounge concept actually came about over many discussions, and you know, as Bill was saying, you have a lot of discussions with urban legislators and suburban legislators, and there's different perspectives. In one conversation with an urban legislator, her concern was HUD housing, and so through that discussion of HUD housing, what happens when an adult use consumer is in HUD housing, they're caught with cannabis smoke, they could lose their HUD housing status and opportunity. So Cannabis Lounge is sort of born through that discussion. But now it's in the medical side. So George, what do you see as like sort of applications for Cannabis Lounge in the medical side?
That's a very interesting question. So some of our practical experience with working with our patients is that we, as a medical operator, are not allowed to deal with the product inside of our dispensary. We can't unwrap it. We can't, screw the battery onto a vape cartridge or open up, a joint or teach people how to use it. There's a lot of newcomers into the industry. There's a lot of new patients. 60% of the residents of New Jersey actually qualify for medical cannabis. Who here has a bona fide relationship with a physician? Raise your hand. Every one of your physicians can now recommend cannabis. If you decide to talk to your doctor about it, he can recommend it to you now. And what this allows, this concept of a medical lounge, will allow us as an operator to become a little bit more instructive to the patients about how they can start to administer their medicine. It's also a very clear fact that about 55% of cannabis consumption occurs through the consumption of extracts. So extracts are a lot more subtle. You can do it through gel caps, you can do it as topicals, you can do it through vape pens, things that are not combustible, which makes it a lot easier for us as operators to allow patients to do it maybe on our property in a separate room. We don't encourage people to break local ordinances or smoking rules inside of towns. We conform and comply with all regulations. So what we may explore is the ability for patients to have areas where we as consultants can teach those patients how to administer their medicine. So that's one angle that we're looking at.
Excellent. It was confusing when I saw that in there and different applications and how it would be utilized, but I think patient instruction is going to be a big part of how the best use of the cannabis lounge.
It allows us to come out of the dispensary more into a teaching environment, not so much as, there's also aspects of preparing your food with components of cannabis in it. That will become more legal to do it in a kitchen area, the baking or teaching and how to cook or things like that. Chefs can get more involved with it in those types of environments. So we may partner with chefs or bakers or things like that.
That's a great concept. So Ken, you've been around the block on this for a little while. You were initially interested in vertical integration. I'm sure you're still interested in some sort of vertical integration. But whether we're talking an RFA request for application issued by the Department of Health, or we're looking at S10 and how they're breaking the licenses apart. So, vertical integration, I think most people know, but, it's one license you can grow, process, and dispense. Now with the new rules from the executive order from the Governor Murphy or the language in S10 and A10, they're breaking up those licenses. What are you going to focus on to get started, and how do you see yourself and other companies like you evolving?
Yeah, we're in a very unique situation here in New Jersey because my family has been a resident here in New Jersey and has tremendous infrastructure built already over the past 50 years. So on this last RFA that happened in August, we applied for an ATC, a vertical integrated, so that's cultivation, processing, and a dispensing. And in this next round, we're also applying for the same thing. We're uniquely positioned, probably everybody's seen, at Pequannock, New Jersey, where we already have permitted zoning from the town compared to a lot of other applications that we can cultivate and we can extract and we can dispense cannabis already with a permit. This was before we even applied to New Jersey. We're definitely going to focus on that side. And the critical point here is there's patients. I think the count is almost 50,000, and there's X amount coming on every single day, every single week. And supply is a big issue here in New Jersey. And it seems like with all this political and all this nonsense that's going back and forth of just getting these permits out, it's hurting the patients, and there's not enough supply in the market. I think there's 100,000 square feet, give or take, right now, 100,000 square feet in the market. 6 new applicants are coming out, and we're very uniquely positioned here to actually, we have 25 acres of high-tech greenhouses ready, shipping food, flowers all throughout the Northeast. For us to change these high-tech greenhouses to cannabis takes us maybe 6 months. So for us, we're going to apply for an ATC, and really it's just perfecting our application on the next round because we scored very well, and I think this was tailored to billion-dollar market cap companies that took these licenses and flipped them, and I think hopefully this round it's for New Jersey operators, New Jersey residents to actually benefit from this program.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that general consensus that, this, whether you're talking about the rules or the RFA or we're talking about the language in S10, A10, it is going to be more focused on small business entrepreneurs, mom and pops in New Jersey, to take advantage of this new and emerging market. But you mentioned the politics of things, right? So here's an interesting scenario, and game played out a little bit. The RFA theoretically, right? So say tomorrow, the Department of Health issues their RFA, right? So request for application, multiple license opportunities you could choose from. You can pick all 3, pick 1 or 2, whatever. That RFA hits on Wednesday tomorrow. The governor gets on his desk on now May 30th. Originally, they were, the 2 schedules were assembly session on the 23rd and a Senate session on May 30th, and that was when we were talking about adult use, and everybody's like, on March 25th, kumbaya, we didn't get it done then, but we're going to get it done by the end of May, and everybody started targeting May 30th. Then that didn't happen, and things broke up, EDA stuff and other political controversies and some challenges and so forth, so that was put on hold. Now we're going to see, now instead of the end of the month, we're going to have adult use, we're going to have a bill in the governor's desk, presumably for the expansion of medical. But if an RFA has been issued, a week prior, what takes precedence, and how do operators even plan for that? Bill, you want to?
They hire very smart attorneys.
Archer and Grinder?
And that's brilliant analysis, by the way. I don't know. We're in the middle of that fight right now. I think the one thing I would say to you all, just in listening to all of us speak right now, I would focus more on what's in the regs that have just been published in the register yesterday as a guide on what's coming next, rather than I would look at S10 and A10. S10 and A10 passed out of committee yesterday. There were significant changes made. You should familiarize yourself with those changes. They're much different than what was up on the board in March. They have not been vetted yet, I would say, through the public and through the legislature. I'm not saying there's anything scary or ugly. It's just changes. So they're going to see where that goes. To Scott's point on what happens next, I don't know. There's a lot of procedural maneuvering and wrangling that can go on back and forth. I'd like to think, and I think this is probably where most of us will be, is trying to find a middle where everybody can agree. There is a pathway forward where the governor can move forward on a RFA, a successful RFA, split out, as we've just discussed here, no longer just applying for vertically integrated. That will be, I assume, part of this RFA, but there'll be a focus on grow and retail. Obviously, there'll be some process as well and separate standalone. And I don't think it's going to be 6. I think you're going to be looking at numbers potentially in the double digits of 20s, maybe even as high as 30 in terms of new licenses, again, spread out. Not as many vertical. But that seems to be where we're headed. And here's what I would say to you. Here's some free legal advice. You'd be a fool not to apply. If you're in this market, if you've been waiting for this opportunity, regardless of what comes, and they could pull the RFA, it could get litigated later on. By the way, the current ones, and I do quibble one thing I would say that Ken said, the politics have hurt this, but also litigation's hurt this. There are 6 operators right now that were just awarded the opportunity for licenses that were moving forward on their applications that they won through this RFA process that are facing, I think, 13 or 14 different lawsuits right now from other applicants who didn't win, right? So there's that game that goes on. It goes on in every jurisdiction. So I don't know the answer to the outcome here, and I think this is not an ideal situation, but I would say this to you. If you're waiting for the next RFA to come out, and this next RFA comes out and it's one of these single standalone things and looks good to you, it's a retail location that you've been looking, or a retail license that you think you can apply for, or you guys have your cultivation team, as my colleague here said, you've got your team ready to go, you'd be a fool not to apply right now, waiting for what happens sorting through the political mess. That's my view.
Yeah. It's interesting because the bill, not rushed through, right? So rushed through is too harsh of a word, but some of the changes were rushed through, right? So the bill itself has been around, and there's big components.
They merged
right.
a lot of the good components. We talked about the consumption space. That I agree with you, has some application. I think you were struggling to figure out from the medical side, well, this is interesting, this is good, this is what we can do. But it wasn't intended for the medical side. It was always intended on the adult use side to have more of like a lounge atmosphere where folks could come and use recreational cannabis without penalty if they were in federally subsidized housing. But we've seen a merger of these bills. We took all the good stuff that was in this adult use bill, including the commission, and they jammed it all into the S10 bill rather than making it a package now. They just had that bill moving on its own.
Minus the adult.
Minus the adult use, correct.
But one of the things, and Dan, you and I were talking about this earlier, I'm going to put you on the spot to explain this. And so in the bill, so we got, some of us got copies of it over the weekend and get a glance at what was going to happen on Monday morning. One of the things that was in the bill that I hadn't really looked at nor had got a solid explanation, but you had good theory on it. So it always references the 6 ATCs. We're going to do all these changes except for these 6 ATCs. And then for some reason, there's an exemption. It changed it from 6 to 7 ATCs. What would your explanation be for that?
And I'm going to give credit to Greg Hilzer over here at my office, who discussed this with me yesterday. There's in the bill there is
Scarinci Hollenbeck.
Scarinci Hollenbeck. That's right. There is. In the bill, there is, yes, they're breaking up the vertical integration so you can apply for one license or a few different licenses. They prohibit vertical integration, except they make an exception for the original 6. George can speak to that. The original 6 ATCs. They also had language that said the second 6 that Ken mentioned that were awarded last December are also exempt from this vertical prohibition. They've changed that now, just yesterday, as the first I heard about it, to exempting the second 6, bumping that up from 6 to 7.
But there are only 6 awards.
But there were only 6 awards. So what does that mean? Why did they bump it up to 7? Potentially, what it means is that they're leaving room for one of the challengers to the decision made last December to actually be awarded a vertically integrated license. That's a potential reason why they're leaving this room now. It would mean that, yes, indeed, number 7, you get X number more points. You applied as a vertically integrated ATC. You fit in this exemption now. You can go forward and do good things as a vertically integrated ATC. Congratulations. So that's one theory. I haven't heard any others. I'd be happy to hear from anybody on the panel who has other ideas, but we see that as one potential option.
Why'd you bring that up?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know why, and if there's a reason, we don't need to discuss it there. But it's just one of those things where it's very peculiar, not really discussed, and that's part of the challenges that I think Bill was mentioning earlier. There's a lot of movement, a lot of new parts, and people are like, why is this change here? Why is that there? Why is it a benefit? George, one of the things that I see that really benefits the first 6. So all first 6 operators had to be nonprofit organization, very unique, setup. Really challenged to operate as a business in a nonprofit format. So one of the good things that are coming out of here is changing it on the S10, A10 to not the original 6 nonprofits to for-profit status. George, what does that do for a company like Curaleaf?
So it wasn't our choice to be nonprofits. It was the regulation at that time. We are lobbying very hard to have the opportunity to convert to for-profits because it just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense for the state. It doesn't make sense for us as operators, and it doesn't really make sense for the patients to act as nonprofits. First off, we're very excited about these changes that are occurring. We strongly believe that 60% of the patients, 60% of the residents of New Jersey qualify for medical cannabis. There is a very robust regulatory environment that regulates the existing 6, will regulate the new 6, and will regulate the new applicants going forward. We believe that there's a market for about 6 million people in this state. There's room for newcomers. There's room for many other MSOs that are going to come into the state. And there's going to be a lot of need for services such as Archer and Scarinci and everyone around the table. but I can only encourage to really understand what you're actually getting into, because you're going to need to have significant amount of capital. You're going to have significant amounts of advisory work coming from good, strong, experienced people that are actually going to navigate you through this process. We've been operating for 5 years. We've probably invested more than $30 million into the state. We are going to continue to do so. The market is doubling in size. So the time really is now to think through these issues. And as an operator, we welcome new SICs. We're going to welcome all the new RFPs, all the new winners of the RFPs, whether they be vertical, whether they be separate. But we will continue to expand the market, and we encourage people to come that have strong experience in this, have strong capital, and have the wherewithal and the infrastructure, which is extremely important to be able to supply the market very quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
Not sure I answered the question, but that's what I'm trying to address.
I think the for-profit, just being able to operate as a business, being a business partner.
Look, being a nonprofit, you actually have to, and our management services agreements are all vetted by the Attorney General. They're all on the table. It's all public record. It's fully transparent. The conversion to a for-profit is a very painful process. If any of you know the nonprofit conversion processes, they're very, very painful. But what we're talking to the Attorney General's office right now is to have a process for specifically the existing 6, possibly the next 6, to convert very quickly under a process that will then allow the state to start collecting their revenues from the supply chain that occurs between manufacturing, processing, and retail. We want to minimize the tax to the patient. We are eliminating the sales tax, but there are other ways to tax our businesses that are not passed on to the patients. So there are models, they're learning that. We have shared our experiences from other states with the state. So I think it's all moving in the right direction. I think it's all the right thing to do is to convert to a for-profit.
Well, I think one thing you guys, we all fail to remind people of on a regular basis. And George, you're running a business. You're hopefully running a successful business in a state that's going to help patients. We're under this ridiculous paradigm where the federal law still says what you do is illegal. So you have your own challenges in and of themselves on what you can take. For other businesses to sit here and avail themselves of federal tax code to write off business expenses, you can. Your banking relationships, which are challenged, right? Different investment vehicles that aren't available to you. So any way that this state, and I think that S10 intends to try to do that for you, to take some of those pressures off as we can here in New Jersey, that's been a goal just from a business standpoint. It makes common sense.
Yep.
And Ken, you've had an interesting journey, right? So you talk about your family farm, 50 years, but in the world of cannabis, you had a different start, right, with Territory. And so just give some general counsel on the formation of teams. And so a lot of people who are interested, they're New Jersey-based entrepreneurs, they're interested in getting a license in New Jersey, but they recognize there's not a lot of experience here in New Jersey for cultivators and these other operators and different skills and disciplines. So a lot of people are looking out west, Colorado, California, and they're looking for partnerships and so forth. So Ken, share like your partnership and how you guys came together and some of the challenges of that and why you're going in your own direction, different direction.
Yeah, sure. So my journey into cannabis started in 2011 when we took one of our family's companies, which was Edible Garden, and merged it into TerraTech. And at that time, that was like 2011, 2012 was when it was like federally illegal, where the feds were pretty much busting dispensaries in California. And TerraTech was one of the first public traded companies in the space in 2013. I think there were only 3 at the time. And they were not touching the plant, and we were just basically doing everything from lighting to all ancillary products at that time. And I still remember, I think it was in 2014 when the market was, we looked at with the DOJ and where the market was, and it had become somewhat acceptable, is we made a decision at TerraTech at the board to actually touch the plant. and we were the first U.S. public company to actually touch the plant. And I still remember coming home and telling my wife, I'm like, we made a decision here that I don't know where it's going to go, because we were the first public company to touch a plant that was public. And it all worked out fine. And since then, every year it's been opening up different rec markets, different medical markets. But the one thing I can say is, everyone's coming into the cannabis thinking it's a green rush, making a ton of money, but it's a business that it starts out vertically integrated for the most part, and that is in itself is very difficult, because you're trying to cultivate, which is agriculture, you're trying to process and manufacture, which is manufacturing, and you're trying to dispense, which is retail, and then you have the whole component of medical and all that on top of it. So you're really running a company that has 3 different verticals that takes a lot of expertise, a lot of capital, and really it comes down to the team and management, and execution is key. And you need to bring in, and I still say, I still think if you're going to start a cannabis company and come into New Jersey, you need to have probably 20% of cannabis experience on a team, and bring in other people in pharmaceuticals, in agriculture, in retail, that can actually help bring, cannabis 2.0, 3.0, whatever you want to call it, to the next level. Because, we come from an agriculture background, and there's a lot of guys out there calling themselves master growers, and they understand how to grow, but they're growing 20 plants in their basement, and then they're trying to commercialize cannabis in these 20,000 square foot grows, 100,000 square foot greenhouse, and they're over their head. They have no idea how to bring a GFSI, a food grade, a medical grade, regulated, no pesticide product to market. So team is probably the most critical part of this whole thing, to actually bring to be in this place. And then of course capital, and everyone underestimates the capital. The capital, if you want to grow and manufacture and dispense this product, it requires a lot of capital, and more than you think. And that's absolutely
It's always more than you think.
More than you think. Absolutely.
It's interesting because I was at a meeting yesterday. So yesterday, all the dynamics going on in Trenton, and I decided I take Bill's advice every now and again. And Scott, you got to separate yourself from this every now. You're going to keep your sanity, right? So I go to this meeting, and it's up in Plainfield, and it was centered around this medical facility and how this medical facility could be engaged at some level in the cannabis space, because it's a non-for-profit medical facility. They focus on they focus on urban areas, and they focus on people who are struggling economically. They take patients in there, and they try and teach them and educate them. And one of the things we were talking about is maybe collaboration, right? So we can get a current operator or a future operator, come partner with them, and we do patient discussions and learning how to teach people how to get off of opioids, how to get off of opioids, Ambien, all these other drugs, Prozac, use cannabis as an alternative. It's less addictive, not deadly, and all those goodness. And then as we're even having those discussions, it came up that even if we teach these folks how to do this, I can get a 90-day supply of opioids for $10. But in order for me to get a month's supply of cannabis, it's $1,000, right? So give or take a couple bucks here or there, but that's not a sustainable amount, right? I mean, that's not something that patients will be able to afford to maintain. That I'm going to get off of this awful drug that's addictive to something that's not addictive and healthier, but I can't afford it. It's a conundrum. So I know there's current operators like Curaleaf. They offer discounts and they do different programs and so forth. But until we fix this at the federal level, I don't know how we're going to get insurance programs. How do we get that copay in there? So there's some things going on at the federal level, the STATES Act, the SAFE Act, and things like that. What do you see just the dynamics of that and how that could impact businesses? Because, if we get to that point where we're educating people to get off of opioids and onto cannabis, you still can't afford the cannabis in its current state.
It's happening already. And you and I have seen this. Listen, in 1996, California took this bold move to decide they're going to try this experiment with medical cannabis. So this isn't like a new thing. This has been going on for decades. It's just newer now that I think people's acceptance have come around. And more importantly, the financial lines have crossed. The opioid crisis has been devastating. And there are phenomenal links back to cannabis as both a preventative cure, but also on a back end step down. But, the feel-good side of this, and I love the feel-good side of this, and we've talked about the feel-good side of it, the money's going to drive this. And you and I sat on a panel 2 years ago,
Probably.
Insurance Counsel, and you had a bunch of frumpy people looking out going, this is really bad, we don't want cannabis. And actually their industry exec from the national organization basically did that. This is really bad, it's illegal. At the end of our discussion, we had folks from general counsel level at some of these insurance companies, particularly in the workers' comp area, going, wait a minute, this is cheaper, better outcomes, and you don't have employees that get addicted to a painkiller and can get back to work. Can we learn more about this? So where the insurance industry now is, you have insurance lobbyists in Washington lobbying for medical cannabis. You have insurance companies right now trying to figure out innovative ways where they can pay a patient and reimburse for cannabis rather than, with all due respect, George, your company, they still are a little afraid of the cannabis company. We see that. We actually are having conversations at the state level where states might involve themselves in some type of fund that would look like a public insurance subsidy for medical cannabis. So, where we were and where we are today are light years ahead.
Yeah, Dan, you States Act, or what do you see? How do we see this sort of?
I think that's right. I mean, there are still plenty of industries, insurance is one, but almost every ancillary business you can think of that might want to become involved in the cannabis industry. Accounting, consulting, security, HVAC, the list goes on and on and on. Think about all the services and all the professional entities that come into putting together a cultivation facility, right? Literally, it expands pretty broadly. And there are plenty of folks who would like to be in the industry, have the expertise to help the industry, who are reluctant because of the federal issue. Once the federal issue is resolved by way of the States Act, by way of the Safe Banking Act, you're going to see a lot more people very, very happy to come on into the industry. And they're basically like teetering over the goal line on their decision about whether or not to participate. And it's this one thing that's holding them up. And when that one thing, and it's a big thing, but when that one thing is settled, yeah, the industry just absolutely explodes because everyone sees this for what it is. It's what a bunch of us have already said. It is a business, right? It is a business that is growing in acceptance. It's growing in societal acceptance. It's growing in political acceptance. The economics have to come along. The insurance has to come along. The banking has to come along. It has to support the interest that is already out there that you see in any poll you want to read right now, that the politicians see, by the way, too. So once that hurdle is overcome by way of federal action, it's going to be a whole new ballgame. It's going to be an entirely enormous new ballgame.
But you are an example, and I like to think we are, and there's others sitting out here right now that are, with all respect to our friends that are actually in the cannabis business, we're not. Our firms weren't involved in cannabis until we had clients come to us and say, hey, we're looking to get into this. And if you had a choice there, and we have this with banks, and I'm seeing nods out there, probably engineering firms, we weren't in cannabis. We weren't involved with cannabis until we got involved with cannabis because our clients came to us for the expertise they seek on everything else, whether you're an accountant, whether you're an engineer. If you're in that professional service industry, you don't have a choice to sit back now. You have a choice to say to your current clientele that are saying, hey, we're going to jump into this now. We see this as a new, interesting place. You can either let them go and find someone else that will help them down that road. And by the way, they're going to call you back and say, and send the rest of the file along. We've got a new place now that we're doing business. Or you can jump in with them and help them and be that trusted guy that you've been on everything else. And our firm has made that choice. I know you guys have. I know there's others out there that are not involved in cannabis right now. You're here for other reasons. You guys are making those choices right now. You're not waiting for the federal government to decide for you.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just jump on that a little bit too. So this is an adult use market scenario, but so in Colorado, they did $1.6 billion in direct retail sales of cannabis. They did about the same, about $1.4 billion in the ancillary side. So all the marketing companies, law firms, accounting firms, social media, security companies, every company that services other industries will service the cannabis industry as well. So I know we've always had these discussions, but that's something you need to be really keen on and also be ready. So if you're one of those ancillary businesses, your security company or what have you, you need to making sure you're doing the networks, building your networks now. So it's a very important part. But George, going back to the patient side of things, I know Curaleaf offers discounts. You have great programs there. Like what do you guys do at Curaleaf? What's sort of the standard to help offset some of the costs that patients have to have prior to insurance being enacted?
Right, that's a great question. One of my topics there was the cost of the medicine. Cannabis is the least expensive medicine in the world. It The problem is that it's not covered by insurance. So the patients are complaining that it's expensive because they can go to CVS or Walgreens or any of the other stores and just pay a $10 or $15 or $20 copay and they're good. What they don't realize is that the insurance companies are getting billed by the manufacturers huge markups because those products are FDA cleared. There's a recuperation of all the costs of the medical research. Medical cannabis may go down the path of FDA, but we're not sure. The FDA has grabbed onto the CBD world a little bit, and that will continue to happen. So what we do is we encourage discounts for minors, veterans, and people that are on SSDI. If people want to take a look in the DOH report for 2018, our product is the least expensive in the state. We have the largest variety. It's the most affordable, and we have the largest dispensary on the East Coast in Belmar, New Jersey. Not to dwell on the cost as much, collaboration. There's huge opportunities that we as operators feel there is for people looking at the industry. We feel that and we're developing this, we're looking at all the states that we're involved with, are the franchise laws. We want to franchise cannabis. Why does Taco Bell have so many? Why does McDonald's? Why can't cannabis be franchised in this state? If somebody wants to dig in on the franchise laws and really figure out how we as operators or the next operators come to the market, we can cultivate, we can process. We may choose not to be in retail. That may not be our strong point. There are other people who have less capital, better experience in retail. Maybe there are franchise operators, regional operators that can work with us. They get the permits, we'll bring in the knowledge, we'll bring in the product, and we can work that way. We also collaborate with hospital systems. We work closely with Cooper. Their palliative care department has been to our dispensaries and our cultivation and our processing facilities to learn more and convince themselves that the product is actually medical grade. We get a lot of referrals from other practices, private practices, industrial practices, and things like that. We pay no referral fees, and that we will never pay referral fees. But it's again that collaboration that's going to occur in the medical side of the field, with the medical fields, with the medical practitioners, with the counselors that are dealing with these opioid addicted patients. 60% of opioid addicted patients that come to our dispensary within 3 to 4 months, they're completely devoid of their opioids because they're using cannabis. We do surveys for the Department of Health. We share the information with the Department of Health to allow and to give them substantiation for their views. And they do that with all the ATCs. So it's all about collaboration in the medical field right now.
Mm-hmm. Ken, so you're starting out, right? So you have your business plan. You're going to be ready to fill out whatever application comes your way. You part of that application is some community development, some community partnership, and you have a medical board and all that. What are your strategies, and what are you guys planning on doing with regard to benefiting patients, supporting the community that you're going to be operating in, and through that standard?
Yeah. When you look at the RFA, the process in there is, I guess, 10 sections, probably very similar to the last round. So not only do you have to have your business plan, your operating, your SOPs from cultivation, manufacturing, process on the business side, you have to have community relationships, you have to have medical partnership relationships, you have to build, you have to bring doctors, medical advisors on your board, and it's all encompassing. So it's not only the community, the medical partnerships, capital. So you have to build a very dynamic team and articulate that very well on this RFA or the new RFA is coming out in order to be successful. I also like to touch on the Estates Act and kind of where cannabis is. If you look at New Jersey, I think, George, you can probably tell me, I think it's selling for $7,500 a pound here in New Jersey. $7? Or a little lower. So you're going to get with the States Act, you're going to get a lot of the cost of capital is going to decrease significantly. So you're going to, because right now, the only way you're raising capital or funding this business is through the public markets or high net individuals or personally. So you can't go to the bank and ask for a loan on anything cannabis related. So with the States Act, this will allow at a federal level, you can go to the bank, and if you want to build a cultivation facility that costs you $10 million and you're credit worthy, you'll be able to get a bank maybe at a 5%, whatever the market allows. So with that being said, the cost of capital is going to decrease. Therefore, your cost of production and your cost of cannabis is going to decrease, which is therefore going to align more with patients. But I think everyone's failing to realize, or they will soon as the Fed, as it becomes federally legal, is that cannabis, just like hemp, is going to be a commodity. Is it going to take 5 years? Is it going to take 10 years? But cannabinoids are going to be a commodity. And if people don't realize it's going to be the low cost producer in the future. So if you're not aligning your business plan to be a low cost producer, you're pretty much going to write yourself out of the market in the future. Mm-hmm. So you need to have that on your radar right now, because the big guys are coming in. There's ridiculous amount of capital getting thrown around with a B behind it for multi-state operators just buying real estate up. Cannabis is a commodity. It is an agriculture crop. It's very not simple to grow, but if you come from an agriculture, it is a plant. And once commercial ag gets a hold of this, the cost of cannabinoids in itself is going to decrease significantly.
Well, you brought up, so I'm going to do one more question to the panel, and I want to open it up to the audience for questions as well. Hemp. So we've been talking about cannabis in New Jersey for the past many years. And hemp's been involved, and we've passed some hemp stuff, pilot programs in the past. But last week, a hemp bill was introduced and passed out of committee within the same week. And I was actually concerned. I was alarmed, actually, when I saw it introduced and it was scheduled for a committee hearing already. I was like, oh, man, there's going to be more political shenanigans going on. What's happening now? Is this another battle and all these other things? But actually, what it was so they passed the Farm Act last October time frame, and signed into law by President Trump, and it was all good things happening in the world of hemp. New Jersey's program, the pilot program, was sort of out of step with the new regulations, and so they introduced a new bill last week. Senator Sweeney sponsored it, Senator President Sweeney sponsored that bill. Got through committee real easy, no questions really. Everybody understands the benefit of hemp. It's really interesting to see some of the more conservative members of those committees who are adamantly opposed to cannabis but are supporting hemp. And I want to point out, it says cannabis in the bill, so if we ever want to go after them, you voted for cannabis, but that's a whole other thing. But the real issue is, we had to get ourselves set up for hemp in New Jersey and being compliant. So hemp. I mean, hemp, we had clothing out of hemp, we had sails out of hemp, we had rope out of hemp. We've done these things traditionally for thousands of years. Now there's all these other commodities. We're talking about hempcrete, we're talking about bioplastics, we're talking about medicine. So hemp. How do you guys see the market of hemp exploding in not just New Jersey, but nationally, internationally, and all the different applications? Bill, do you have any thoughts on that?
The only thing I'd say to you on this, in regard to Pot's born cousin, I do sense some crackdown coming. So as a lobbyist, as a lawyer, a regulatory side guy, the CBD side of hemp has gotten really scary. Mm-hmm. And I have talked to a number of folks that are probably about to lose their shirts on speculative investments in CBD ventures from all over the place. I mean, offshore into some very interesting locations in China and Russia, and even some folks that are doing it here. I talked to one guy who's got an organic farm in West Virginia that may or may not be near a coal mine. I think you're going to see federal, state, and local crackdown aimed at CBD. I think there's a lot of focus now on teen use and access. It overlaps in the vaping community. So that's my only thing I'd say related to hemp right now is I see a cautionary tale of a large crackdown coming on the sort of CBD market.
And it's a very good point, too, on the China thing, right? So you will see CBD being sold in gas stations and whatnot. Hemp is a phenomenal plant. It does many things, but one of the things it does, it cleans up soil. And so what some of these countries are doing is they're putting a bunch of hemp down in some brownfields areas, some toxic areas. They're cleaning up the area, and then they're converting that and turning it into CBD, and they're selling that at a gas station. So be very, very cautious of what you're purchasing. I don't know, Dan, what are your thoughts on the world of hemp?
Hemp and CBD, I guess has not gotten as much play in the bright light of adult use and even medical THC cannabis use. But it is a massive, massive industry, as everybody knows, right? As you say, we're selling it at gas stations. The reality is that it's much more detailed, not surprisingly. It's much more detailed than you might pick up at first blush. Hemp is, when you're talking about CBD, industrial hemp. It means it has 0.3% or less by dry weight of THC content. If it's anything above that, it's still illegal, okay, as far as the DEA is concerned. Even below 0.3%, the FDA still has a problem with it. And the FDA is still wrestling with this right now. In fact, at the end of the month, the FDA is having its first sort of stakeholder listening session about, okay, we see everything going on out there with CBD. Let's get our arms around it and figure out how to do it. Because as of now, it's federally illegal to put CBD in food products. Anything, drinks, anything. Because FDA has laws on the books that say so. And they've also regulated it, by the way, as a drug in Epidiolex, which is a child anti-seizure medication. Having classified it as a drug, they can't classify it as a food additive or a dietary supplement. They're trying to work their way through it because they see it happening and they know that some, order has to be brought to chaos here. But that's the reality. I mean, people selling CBD, ideally, but no guarantees, ideally they've sourced it all the way back to the grower, who ideally is a licensed industrial hemp grower in whatever state they're growing in and has a license from that state to do it. And ideally you have test results showing that you have 0.3% or less in whatever you're selling to the public. And even if all that is true, if the FDA or the feds really wanted to, they could give you a hard time about it. Now, the reality is, much like the cannabis market and the legal cannabis industry, DEA didn't have the manpower to go down and kick down doors coast to coast. And so that's kind of how the legal state programs began. FDA is in kind of the same position. They can't go busting every small hemp CBD dealer. They're focusing on people who are saying things on the side of their CBD juices, will cure your baldness and your heart disease at the same time. This kind of snake oil stuff, these outrageous health claims. Those are the folks that FDA is looking at and busting right now. But I think Bill is right. And you see it in the last couple of months, in New York City, for example, pretty severe crackdown on hemp-derived CBD purveyors, right? And they're allowed to do that under local regs. And then they're going to say, by the way, it's still federally illegal. And they're totally correct. So it is a risky proposition to get into the hemp CBD business. If you can do your due diligence and back it all the way up to the grow, up to the source, and sort of get comfort and be able to provide comfort to anybody who may come knock on your door, that this is legal from grow to sale, maybe you're okay as long as they don't fall back on the federal law. But it is a risky proposition. It is going to be a huge industry. It already is. It may be bigger in the end than the actual THC cannabis industry. Who knows? For now, choppy waters.
George, you guys, Curaleaf had a great agreement with CVS announced a couple months ago. What's going on?
So, from a practical point of view, Kentucky is and has passed the Farm Bill, and they are allowing tobacco farmers to grow hemp as a replacement crop. They are very, very good at growing hemp. I can confirm that. We buy hemp oil. We manufacture products in Kentucky. We have over 25 SKUs of topicals, and you're absolutely right that the Food and Drug Administration will not allow it to go into food or anything that you ingest. So we have over 25 products, and we are angling our hemp-based CBD to the health and wellness space, which are things for cosmetics, things for creams, for wound care, for eczema, for psoriasis, things for dermatological use. And that's reaching a lot of success. But it is a very tricky area. If you want to manufacture, I suggest manufacturing according to the Farm Bill regulations. If you want to process, you're also subject to Farm Bill. If you're a retailer, do your due diligence on the certificates of analysis of the products, of the components of the products that you're being offered to sell in your stores. So it's for us, it's a health and wellness play that will definitely take off very, very fast. The products that are coming from abroad are highly, highly questionable. Mm-hmm. So go with a U.S. manufacturer that's Farm Bill compliant.
Every time. Farmer Ken, what are your thoughts on that?
Farmer Cat, there you go.
I actually think hemp is going to be larger than THC, and the reason why is everyone's. I agree with everyone up here, but there's a big difference what's happening right now. So there's cannabinoids and there's THC and there's CBD, and all the CBD products are just saying CBD. But really, there's CBD isolate, which is basically just CBD, and then there's full spectrum hemp. So that is basically the whole entire plant extracted, CBD, CBN, CBG. So what the FDA has, which is illegal right now, is CBD because GW Pharma owns that DEA that rule. But full spectrum hemp is okay. And it has been, but we'll see with what the FDA says coming out at the end of this month. But yes, you have to stay within the Farm Bill and build your facilities, GMP facilities. It's going to be a food regulated product. It's going to be FDA guidelines. Chain of custody of the product from seed all the way through is extremely critical. I would definitely not take any hemp from outside the country. It is absolutely. You don't know what China's doing. You don't know what pesticides they're putting on this product. But I think hemp is going to be absolutely a lot larger globally. And I think it's going to make its way into medicine and pharma, where the Johnson & Johnson of the world are going to find CBG, and it's going to be used for some kind of biotech drug in the future. And also, I think the next push is going to be water soluble, a true water soluble, not an oil for food and beverages. And we're working on that as well. So we hold a patent on a water soluble extraction process in the USA. So it's very, very unique opportunity for a fast acting water soluble. So the beverages are going to be the next push for in the space. So
Very cool. Really cool.
Scott,
Yeah.
Ken brings up an interesting point of the different cannabinoids that are in the plant. We keep hearing the THC, the CBD, but there are huge medical benefits to isolating specific cannabinoids in different levels of concentration. We last week applied to the New Jersey Department of Health to allow CBG to be added in various concentration levels to all of our extract products in New Jersey. And they are hands down saying, go for it, because it has definitely a lot of medical benefits in an isolated form. So if we can get it out of hemp and it's a low cost, we can bring the cost down of the product, because right now we're extracting it from the cannabis plant and isolating the THCs, the CBDs, and the other ones as well. So
one more thing, Scott. And if anybody's interested getting into hemp here in New Jersey as it comes on, is I don't think the future is fiber and fiber hemp, basically out of clothing, hempcrete, is probably extracting cannabinoids for some kind of food, beverage, pharma, that CBG, that's where the value here is New Jersey, especially with all this pharma manufacturing place. To do 20,000 acres of fiber hemp is just not where New Jersey should play.
Yeah, agree. All right, so questions from the audience. Questions. Microphone. Eric.
Thanks, guys. Good panel. From the marketing side, particularly on medical, since we're foreseeably going to be in a medical.
Sounds sad.
What's that?
That sounded sad.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's all good. There's an upside. There's a lot of gray at best around how to best market in a medical capacity. Gray areas on HIPAA and high-tech compliance that normally a pharma company would follow. How are you going and about marketing to medical patients for your products? Most of it, George, but Counsel would be great too.
I think these guys should speak about the regulatory issues. We are not allowed to advertise on radio and print anywhere outside of the dispensary, so we're confined to our physical space. We do it through education. As far as the packaging, it has to be all childproof. It has to have certain, it's got to be opaque on one side. We prefer to have one side we do it in a bag. One side you can see the product, whether it's a vape pen or a cartridge or lozenge or a topical, whatever it is. As far as HIPAA goes, we're compliant on HIPAA all around. So we definitely work with the DOH in approving every single package that we have. The key is in the label. All the ingredients have to be on the label. It has to have the patient name, the barcodes. There's a very strict seed to sale barcoding system that you can buy that is approved by the state DOH. So marketing is very confined. A lot of it is word of mouth. If a patient feels better, they're going to tell 10 people. If a patient feels bad and has a bad experience, they're going to tell 10 people. So we as operators have to be on our game when we're talking to the patients and making them feel good about that, and give the doctor the ability to recommend a operator for their patients to go see. We give a lot of educational information to the doctors' practices. We give them pamphlets. We invite them to educational seminars. So that's my piece.
I'd say this to you too. This is where I think you forget about the regulation. I think you nailed it, by the way, George. There are some changes going on, both at the regulatory level and I think in statute, that would change some of the abilities to offer incentives to patients and things of that nature that will benefit patients and help with marketing. But the most profound thing that I've seen in this space, and you guys are absolutely involved in this, is on the community side. And I'll mention a guy that we all know here, Ken Walsky, who's a registered nurse. He's been a cannabis activist and is involved in a lot of the patient community side. Ken has literally gone to 55 and older communities in the community center and held coffee clutches with the community and educated about different products, different entities in their jurisdiction where they could go and different places and what the products do and all that. And I've seen that type of marketing, which is more grassroots level. It's been incredible.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the short answer is, as George said, follow the law, right? Sounds obvious, but it gets very, very, very detailed, and it is very confined. And you do end up relying on, and effectively in a lot of cases, word of mouth, community participation. It's basically, it does come down to how well are you running your shop? If you're running it well, I'm not going to say it's all going to take care of itself, because it won't, but that's your best bet. I mean, you need to be able to be known as a good actor, a good purveyor of product, a good advocate, as Ken is, and that's really what it comes down to. You are limited. There's some language in the bills and the regs that's kind of expanding it out. Different things come along, like you're allowed to put your prices online. I think was a development a couple months back, and that was a big thing because people could go online and see, oh, this costs X. Think about the fact that you couldn't do that prior to a few months back. You had to actually go. Well, now that if that can be termed marketing, which I think it can, it helps, right? It helps just bring clarity to a situation that is in sore need of clarity. So it's those sorts of things. It's taking advantage of opportunities as they arise to expand your marketing capabilities or what you're allowed to do, and then doing it the right way.
And one more thing I like just to add is I think in the new bill there's also delivery, I think, coming.
Yeah.
So that's going to add another whole level of marketing that you can probably work around some regulations. So.
Great. Questions? Okay.
I know we touched on briefly before the criminal justice perspective and testing once getting pulled over and blood tests. Logistically, how do you see that playing out? Do you see the police departments handling the blood testing with in-house phlebotomists or bringing that to hospitals? And how do you see the funding for that? Because mainstream, drug recognition experts, not every department has one, and sometimes they go department to department. And I just am curious to see if taxpayers will be paying that or if that would be coming out of the pockets of the corporations.
I opened that door, so I guess I'll answer it. And by the way, I'm sitting behind the podium, so if you don't like my answer, you can throw whatever you want. You'll hit Scott. It is a great question. It is kind of where we were sort of, in a more whimsical mood, sitting in the committee room watching them debate the merits of a decriminalization bill, wondering why they wasn't hitting them all in the head. There's a proposal in Trenton yesterday to decriminalize less than 2 ounces of marijuana. And in some ways, that was a challenge to the folks that were against legalization for a variety of different reasons to say, well, how about this? If you agree we shouldn't be locking up people for this any longer, if you agree that we shouldn't be policing this, agree that we should be expunging criminal records, but all these other issues that you come up with, right, about driving under the influence, access to teens and all that, well, we can decrim, but you don't solve any of that because decrim doesn't bring in any revenue. It allows the same concerns to continue. And a lot of us agree with decrim because we disagree with the criminalization of this to begin with. But it doesn't solve your problem. So in the bill that was up in March, there is revenue generated. They booked $60 million, by the way, that they should probably take out of this year's budget. We're punting this off into the, oblivion. $60 million in this year's budget. There's going to be a lot more over time, right? We've seen revenue estimates of at least $300 million when this is fully matured. And I think, as Scott's talked about ancillary revenue, it's a lot more. That bill allocated funding in the legislation to increase the amount of drug recognition officers that we have right now in our state. Not just to expedite the training, which, by the way, the state already pays for. That's the big joke. Your town, wherever you live, I live in Berlin, in South Jersey, we already have access to a drug recognition officer because we already have people driving under the influence that can't be, of a substance that can't be tested. So we've got this in place. This is already happening. I joked I sat in the municipal court in Evesham and watched 3 people get convicted of DUIs that had nothing to do with alcohol through this 2-part test. So towns are already doing it. What we are adding to the equation is the money to expedite more training. And here's another little pot sweetener that the towns like. Right now, when you send a regular officer up for DRE training through the Attorney General's program, the state pays for that training. What they don't pay for is the weeks of off-duty time that officer is required to go outside of their town and go up for training. And there's a court hearing thing they've got to go sit through and a whole bunch of training. This bill allocated funding to pay for that overtime cost too. So the legalization of cannabis compounds some of these issues, at least if you listen to some of the naysayers on this. We've already got this problem out there of people driving under the influence. This bill also allocates money to pay for the increased training and a variety of other things. There's drug dog replacements. You cannot retrain drug dogs right now, so we have to replace them. There's money in the bill to do some of that as well, which we by the way, should be doing if we're saying that cannabis shouldn't be criminalized and is now medicine. We shouldn't have drug dogs that are hitting on this on search and seizure issues. So there's a lot going on in the bill that I think funding is the answer to, unfortunately. Money is the answer.
I think testing is a multifaceted thing. So you have workman's comp testing, and then you have the point of search and seizure or the law enforcement side. To my knowledge, I don't think anyone can really determine what is the medical point of impairment when you're on THC. So THC remains in your blood for up to 30 to 45 days. It's been very difficult for the medical world to determine what is, like if you medicate yourself last night, today you wake up fine, you get into a car accident, you stumble on the curb or something, and the guy goes, "Oh, you're under the influence." Well, you medicated over 48 hours ago, but your THC level and your fat content is still going to show up in your test. So it's a bit of a controversial issue. I get all the regulations and the decrim and all that stuff, but I really, as an operator, I think it's because law enforcement asks us all the time, how do you know whether he's alcohol impaired, THC, or a combination of his opioid medications and alcohol and all these different things? It gets very complicated at the point of law enforcement. So we're encouraging someone to really develop a true test so that the recognition officer can literally have the right to pull it out, just like a alcohol test, and say, breathe into this. And it'll say, well, you have this much in your blood, but you medicated 20 days ago. It'll still show up. So we're encouraging that. All that stuff will get sort of resolved, the testing, once there's a real test.
And that's the $1 billion opportunity too, right? So
Yeah.
talking about a lot of $1 billion
Well,
opportunities. Be the guy that invents the cannabis tester, right? I think I'm going to add to that too, just a little pontification on decriminalization, what we're missing out. So as Bill perfectly articulated, we have all these things except for the other benefits. So decriminalization is morally correct. If you believe that cannabis should never have been illegal in the first place, decriminalization is morally correct. However, it does not bring the other added benefits to communities. So the taxes that bring to local communities to help with the overtime costs and retraining of dogs and all these other benefits that come to the community through legalization. And it's not just the benefits to the community. You look at Colorado. The Colorado Division of Criminal Justice issued a report last October. In that report were some amazing things. So DUIs in Colorado, in a state that is legal with regulations and education and enforcement, DUIs have gone down in Colorado. They have the law enforcement, everything else in there, and the education regulations in there to be effective. DUIs have gone down. Those who have been proven to be cannabis impaired. So that was the thing here. So if you have THC in your system, it's been 2 weeks, you're completely sober. But if I'm in a car accident now in Colorado or anyplace else, they'll pull my blood out and say I had THC in my system even though I was sober. So Colorado has a standard of 5 nanograms. So if you have 5 nanograms in your system or greater, it's sort of like our blood alcohol test, you are legally impaired per their law. Those traffic fatalities have gone down. DUIs have gone down. Those traffic fatalities have gone down, and teenage use has gone down. So they're reaping the benefits of a legalized market on a societal level. And I think that's really important to understand when we're talking about decrim versus legalization. You might as well just go all the way. Question.
What are the actual benefits to communities to having cannabis in their market? So, like, why would my town want me to be an operator in that market? Whether I'm growing, selling, are there major tax benefits? I mean, what's the trade-off for them?
There shouldn't be any major tax benefits on the medical side, is my view. That's a personal view, but I don't think we should be taxing medicine. And I think the promise down the line is going to be mostly about job creation on the medical side right now. I think that in the conversations I've been having with communities, there's concern. There's concern about how it's going to be perceived by residents. I think location matters. If you're trying to do something on Main Street, you're probably going to get a different look than if you're doing something in an industrial park that's on the borderlands of the town. Innovative mayors, and there are a lot of them in our state, are looking for new ideas. And again, as a creature of politics, I'll say this to you. There's 2 things that poll in this state at the top of a poll. Any poll. I don't care what you're doing. Running for mayor if you have the money for a poll, or you're running a presidential poll in our state. It's property taxes and jobs and the economy. Those are always 1 and 2. They interchange. And so if you're the mayor, that's what you're looking at. And you're looking at what types of investment you're going to draw in. So if you're a cultivator, who else is going to want to be around you, right, that might want to service what you're doing? If you're a processor, similarly, right? The retail side gets a little bit more tricky, but a lot of innovative mayors are looking at these as anchors in redevelopment areas. So you're going to bring traffic into a community too. So I think that's your best selling point. And again, I'm staying on the medical side. There's a tax advantage that changes the game when we start talking about recreational. That's where they're going to, because of, I think, the good work of a lot of people on here, convinced legislators that allowing municipalities to create their own tax here. This is very new concept. We only allow for rental cars and hotels. Municipalities can create a separate tax on the recreational, at least in legislation, but medical is really about jobs and traffic. It can be, and it can be about those other things too.
Right. Yeah, and just to put a point on that, I think Bill's absolutely right. I mean, the tax issue is one thing. Whether or not a municipality is going to actually be able to impose a minor tax on a medical facility, which maybe it will be. I think S10 actually calls for now a 2% potential tax, which was just added yesterday. So, by the way, I agree. I think taxing medical cannabis, frankly, just strikes me as wrong, and that's legalese. It just feels wrong, right? And the bill does call for a cessation of the taxes on medical cannabis as of 2025.
It's the Jersey way. We eliminated a tax by raising another.
This
is
exactly.
So Jersey.
It's perfect. It's perfect. So maybe there will be a little bit of tax benefit to the municipalities who host medical cannabis facilities, perhaps. But I wanted to touch on something that Bill mentioned: redevelopment. Right? If you're a mayor in a town, West Jersey, somewhere, you have X number of vacant properties, within your boundaries, right? Spinning off no property tax revenue whatsoever. Maybe it's a broken down old warehouse, something like that. But that is a place that might be attractive to somebody who wants to put in a cultivation facility, which of course then, yes, will draw ancillary service businesses and more to the community. So it is that. It's kind of the redevelopment, reuse of underutilized or absolutely not utilized properties, bringing people in there, giving them jobs. It has kind of basically an aggregate effect. If you can make use of a property that's being unused right now for a legal purpose that spins off jobs and potentially taxes, but also brings other traffic to the community, that's an attractive thing to me as a mayor who's looking for revenue streams.
George, you totally transformed your area. See a lot of other new construction. I just saw the other day, another company building up.
Yeah. So as far as New Jersey goes, we took over a light industrially zoned area. We've purchased 5 properties congruent to each other. We have 130 employees at the facility now that all live within a radius of 15 miles. They get full benefits. They're living a much higher quality of life. These are people that are either from the underground industry that are now legitimizing themselves, getting fully W-2'd income, getting unemployment benefits, disability, and all those different things, as well as some of the more direct investments that we make at the request of the town councils. We've supported the VFW. We've built a Korea War memorial to the Belmar veterans along the creek, Timber Creek there. We invest into the town community, into the baseball league, into the football league, into the hockey leagues, into the old age homes. We never advertise. It's quiet. It's through the mayor and the town council. And there's a lot of that, and you have to commit to that because that is extremely important. We work a lot with law enforcement. We teach lessons to the Gloucester Police Academy, to the cadets that graduate on real life situations with cannabis. So there's a lot of, you got to give back. You got to give back.
Yeah, I agree with all above here. I think it's community and jobs on the medical side. And I think the taxes are on the recreational side, what for the local towns. And for example, when I was with TerraTech, we had a Bloom dispensary in Oakland, California. It's if everyone knows Oakland, California. So we were employing about 70 people there. And when we first started, about 2013, there was nothing around. There was no restaurants, and it was you didn't even want to walk on the streets. And then basically 4 years later, there was restaurants. There was Uber, built a block of office buildings, and a whole entire redevelopment of just that block. And jobs and economic development were significant. So I think taxes on the rec is one thing, but on the medical side, it's all about community. It's all about jobs. It's all about everything that goes into a facility. On a cultivation facility, manufacturing, you're spending millions and millions of dollars, HVAC, contractors, and then all the employees that are working there. So it's, I think to Scott's point, Colorado was 1.6 million in medical, but ancillary was almost the same thing. So there's a lot of business and economic development around the cannabis industry as well.
And another benefit is crime does go down where dispensaries go up, whether it's medical or adult use. The security around, and that was actually, Oakland was one of the examples. Oakland was this major redevelopment area, and like cannabis can take a lot of credit for that and how they sort of the gentrification of that area, the redevelopment of that area, bringing new jobs and opportunities to that area has been fantastic. But one of the things that not really spoken of too much is the fact that there's a lot of security around cannabis companies. So if there are bad guys in that area, guess what? They're going to go away from where the security cameras are. So there's that benefit as well.
If adult use is approved, is the medical program? What happens with the medical program? Is it deemed irrelevant? Do the the dispensaries? Are there multiple dispensaries, one for rec, one for medical? Can you all just talk a little bit about that?
The program that is being developed at the legislative level right now contemplates both. The new commission that's going to be formed will regulate both. There is no intent to create an advantage over either, and I think most people that are tuned into this effort understand that they do exist side by side. And I think what we talked about here is I think the ability to really give a shot in the arm to the medical side is going to be once the insurance industry climbs in. You will see huge advances. And I think the other side that we haven't really scratched the surface of yet here in New Jersey is what you're going to see with the medical research that's going to come along with medical cannabis. There's some impediments at the federal level, although there's a lot of different entities now here in New Jersey that are exploring it. I mean, down where I live, Jefferson Hospital has been dipping feet into the water now into this space. So I don't see any change in that trajectory. I see that continuing. I see there are lots of lucrative opportunities on the medical side for investment and new developments. But I see the insurance industry being the real game changer for the medical side. That will create new abilities in terms of payers to be in this market and help subsidize medical.
100%.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think the medical side of the industry will be impacted when adult use does come along, whenever it does. Exactly how kind of remains to be seen. People believe perhaps that, the medical side will become a little less relevant if you can go down the street and just purchase it, without having to go through the hoops of getting a doctor's certification and prescription and referral and whatnot. That may be true. I think two things though. There is going to be a segment of the population that has been in the medical program for a long time and they're comfortable there. They like the idea that they are going through their doctor's office to, take this medicine, take these drugs. I think there's a comfort level there. The other thing to think about, and this ironically titled, this might be a more minor part of it, but think about minors who are in the medical program, right? And they are being prescribed medical cannabis for whatever condition they may have. They're obviously, the transactions are being performed by a caregiver, right? But you're not going to have children, minors, going into a rec-approved dispensary. They are going to stay in the program. So that's something that I think kind of passes by a lot of people, but that's one of the ways that medical, I think, is going to obviously continue to stay very, very relevant, notwithstanding adult use legalization.
George?
I think there will continuously be a contingency of our patient base, the medical patient base, that will not go to the street or not go into the adult use space because they're just more medically inclined. And as soon as the insurance coverage comes in, there's no need for the adult use portion of the market. We, as a national company, do both. We play in both markets, but I think in Jersey, we will follow the regulations, and if the legislation allows us to also do adult use, we will be there. The product will not change. It will be the highest quality product available, and the regulations will continue to be as tough as they are.
Yeah, I agree with Bill on this one. I think the medical program, once insurance kicks in and these payers, I think the medical market will probably outpace the rec market, even though when rec and legalization comes on in New Jersey, you'll get a huge uptick, probably significant. But once that money comes in where insurance money pays, I think the medical then outpaces rec at that point.
And think of that as a discount too. So in the future, once we do get this right, we have adult use side by side with medical. Medical won't have its taxes anymore. So if we're using the last value, which is $42 an ounce, you get an automatic savings of $42 when you purchase an ounce of medical. So, I mean, that's one of the things that will sustain itself. Plus, we have this amazing pharmaceutical industry in New Jersey where the partnership with the cannabis community and the pharmaceutical industry will provide values where we're not talking about it. We touched on it today, but we're not just treating cancer or curing cancer. So I think medical is always going to play a major role because cannabis is medicine.
Hello. I just wanted to stress a comment that was made about being careful and concerned about what's coming in from outside the U.S. There are rules and regs pretty substantial ones on traceability and transparency for the ingredient, flavor, and fragrance industry. So anything coming in from anywhere in the world, it's being tracked, and there's some great, rules in place for that, but not in place for cannabis. Not yet in place for cannabis. So that's a serious concern, and my clients in the ingredient world are worried about representing cannabis from anywhere outside the U.S. The other thing is, I wondered if any of you we're currently working with Emerald Scientific, the CESC, which is a consortium on cannabis, where they're doing tremendous studies. PhDs are doing studies on dosing protocols and on identifying all the strains of CBD so that you can really understand what's going into products. And these, we're working on iconography for packaging so that eventually consumers will be able to look at a package and know clearly what strain or what dose is in that particular product. So that, I don't know if any of you are working with those groups, but there's some really incredible work being done in the area of trying to legitimize and stabilize the whole industry of cannabis, CBD, et cetera. So.
Any questions? All right, I got one last question. Ballot question, good or bad idea?
Good.
So go.
It is a dumb idea.
A ballot question. So
Ballot
I'm sorry, I was really quick with it. A ballot question, right? So we went from legal. Oh, we have one regular. Okay, so let me do this because I already teed it up, but we'll get to you. Okay, but ballot question, right? So we had adult use ready to roll March 25th, and then it didn't work out. Definitely going to get done by May 30th. We're not going to do it now. We're just going to make it a ballot question in 2020. Thoughts?
We are on the precipice of getting this done through the legislature, and I believe that is the right way to go about doing this. The politics of other things got in the way of getting this done, and I'm still not a believer that we're done yet. But the ballot question is troubling for a number of reasons. First, everyone that understands how things were adopted in other states, forget about that. We don't have that ability here. We don't have initiative and referendum, and thank your lucky stars, by the way, we don't. We are not California, where you have literally competing ballot questions on the same ballot. What would happen here would be a constitutional amendment. And when you amend the Constitution, you've got to get very specific and be very general. It would be tax and regulate for adults 21 and over. And all the other details that we've talked about here are left up later. And we've seen this once before. Similar polling, an industry, and I'm not saying anything about the current industry sitting here. In fact, I will say something very positive about George. George and his company have weighed in heavily on a regular occasion to educate and lean in towards more competition in the market. You've been incredible in this respect. But there are others out there that have a license right now that don't want anyone coming in. There are people on our border that will spend money because they don't want New Jersey to legalize from New York and Pennsylvania. And I will submit to you the casino ballot question that we had a couple years ago is a constitutional amendment to allow gaming in North Jersey. Atlantic City didn't want it. New York and Pennsylvania didn't want it. There was money being spent against it. And the public, who were generally in support of it in polling, shot it down because they started asking questions, good questions about where are these going to go? We don't know. People in back rooms in Trenton are going to carve it out once you vote. What's the tax rate going to be? Where's the money going to flow? See the first question. All of these questions, they didn't have answers. You know what the public did? They went, no thanks, we don't want it. We're waiting to 2020 to do this on the ballot, on that shaky ground. And even if they get it done, even if it passes, we are right back to where we are right now, carving up the exact same stuff. It's time to get this done. They can get it done in June. We may still be here in July because of a budget shutdown and things are not going well in Trenton. I am committed. I am absolutely committed to getting this done through the legislature because if we wait for the ballot, we may be waiting a lot longer than 2021.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. We're on the 1 yard line with this, and politics got in the way. And now we're talking about waiting a year and a half to be back here again. Because there is going to be no transparency. Vote for it, we'll figure it out later. Well, what do you mean we'll figure it out later? We're going to be doing this exact same exercise again. And we will have waited for a year and a half and longer because it'll take another X number of months after the vote comes in to do anything. So we're talking about 2 years plus before we have a program. One of the things to keep in mind here is that New Jersey would be the first state in the country to legalize adult use cannabis legislatively. First in the country. Vermont has some legislation, but basically they just said, okay, you can grow at home. That's all they did. That's what their law says. Good luck. What we're trying to do is have the ultimate degree of transparency, tell everybody the nitty-gritty details in real time. And yes, it's cumbersome and it's delay-filled and there are politics involved. There always are. But this, people are forgetting, this would be the first law of its kind in the country. Of course it's taking a long time, but we're this close. And now we're going to kick it off for 2 years to be here again? Doesn't make a lot of sense. Doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think for a lot of the reasons that Bill said and many more that we don't have time to get into, yeah, if at all possible, if this is going to happen, and it seems like it will, it seems like this is what the people want, and even most of the politicians maybe, we should do it now. We should do it now and start wrestling with it rather than waiting.
I have nothing else to add.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
Well done.
Ken, any thoughts on the ballot question?
No, I agree with these guys. I think preferably do it through legislation because you have a lot more control. And New Jersey is an opportunity to have probably one of the best programs in the country. California's disaster when you look at all these other programs. But I think New Jersey, if they do it through legislation, is probably one of the best in the country, and you should do it that way.
Can I just add one point to that? You've been involved in this. I think we all have. We're also doing something differently, and you absolutely hit on this. We're creating a market, too, in addition to legalization, but we're doing something differently than other states that created their own market. We've added priorities for residency and racial and social justice concerns. And I just read an article today that states like Colorado are backing into that stuff now, coming back and saying, we should really expunge people's criminal records. My goodness gracious, you've had a program for 4 years and you're just coming around to that realization? These are really difficult issues to get around, as we saw yesterday in committee. They're worthy issues to get around, though, and get them done right. And so it's taken more time. It is complicated. People have gotten frustrated. We should have just made it easy and just legalize and then get to that stuff later. Those may be right answers at the end of the day, but we are doing this differently than really any other state in the nation ever has.
Question.
I was going to ask to hear a little bit more about veterans in particular. I'm working with my father. I'm a caregiver for him, and we're working with the VA right now. But we, unfortunately, on him being on a fixed income, I'm not foreseeing him going to be able to purchase health insurance. So for me, the health insurance is like, okay, well, that's great. We're still going to be buying out of pocket. So I'm trying to figure out, I wanted to hear from you guys. What do you see on that level with the VA? I know it's kind of federal, but
you may have some help here in New Jersey, but it will not be specific to veterans. It will be some of the things we talked about here in reducing the cost for a medical program that I would assume your father would be qualified. We don't have to go into the specifics. The real relief you seek is at the federal level. And the only good news I can give you on that front is there are profound changes happening in exponential pace. I mean, my joke on this is they can't agree that today is Tuesday down there in Congress, but they do have broad agreement on this. And veterans that's one of the pathways forward, I think, to begin to legitimize this. And I don't know where you live, and we can catch up after, but even some of our Congress people here in New Jersey that sit on the House Armed Services Committee have been focused on work in this space, and they're not even for legalization generally. They're for getting help for veterans. So I suspect you're going to see some relief in that aspect, but he's not going to get any until the VA starts recognizing this.
And there is a consensus coming, right? So right now, I don't think a VA doctor is even allowed to advise a patient on the use of cannabis as an alternative to opioids and other drugs, right? So, but there is a consensus that law does need to change, and a lot of these things are coming around because Ken mentioned the billionaires are in this market now. You have all these huge companies, multi-million-dollar companies, and billionaires involved, and all these folks, and it's a cash-only business. The push for all this has been pulled by the veterans, the VFW, the American Legion. They support medical marijuana. They're supporting it. They were supporting the legalization of it. And you have these other interests here and these other interests here, and they're all coming together. They had different backgrounds and why they were motivated to be in this space, but now it's all coming together. And I think it's going to be the banking that's going to kind of push this over the edge, because you have all these businesses out there in a cash-heavy business industry, rather. And I think that's going to push it. But there's good companies like Curaleaf that offer discounts for veterans, and there's 20% discount. So it's right now it's pushing on the federal side, but finding dispensaries that offer discounts for veterans. Okay, that was it. That was our last question. So, all right, panelists, thank you all very much. You did a great job.
Thank you, Scott Rudder. Thank you, Bill Caruso, Dan McKillop, George Schidlovsky, and Ken Vandevrede. As always, we'll have full coverage of this morning's proceedings later today on NJBIZ.com and then later in our print edition. We'll also post a video of the full event on our YouTube channel. And speaking of the video, thank you to Kane AV for handling that. If you want more information about Kane, you can stop by the registration desk. If you can, please join us at our next discussion, which is on opportunity zones. That's on June 11th at the Palace at Somerset Park. It's just about a half a mile from here. So in traffic, just about another 45 minutes of driving. I hope to see you there. Thanks for coming, everyone.